While we are having a continuing discussion, this is also a responsive discussion and analysis. What we are looking at right now are the issues of rights of return. And so a number of issues have been presented related to rights and return. In other words, the right of return. Not only the right of return that typically is associated with returning to land, but also the return of property and the return of assets to rightful owners. Now, in understanding what is going on, there are a number of complications, and we are not only going to address some of the historical dynamics related to American Indian right of return, but what we are also going to do is look at some of the psychosocial and perhaps spiritual dynamics that might be getting in the way of this right of return. There are a number of Eastern dynamics that have been transplanted into the West. And these dynamics inform the way that colonization took place. It informs the way that the people have been treated. It informs the attitudes of those who were the original colonizers and their descendants. It informs some of the paradigms that people have who have also joined in the colonizing and settler dynamic. Now, there are a number of paradigms operating that people have to take into consideration when thinking about this whole dynamic of the right of return. That whole idea of reparative justice or restorative justice, because there are some underlying paradigms that are operating that impact all of that. There are paradigms related to existence, paradigms related to ethics, law, customs, morals, and values. And so there are variations that exist related to those dynamics. And so the East is not the West, and the West is not the East. However, there is this merging of the two that we are dealing with right now, and there is an overshadowing of the reality, the historic reality of the West. In other words, the American indigenous people. There's an overshadowing of those entities, and there is a manifestation of the Eastern entities. And so it makes it very difficult to clearly consider exactly what is going on. But we're going to look at a few dynamics related to the East that will give you a little bit more information about what you are dealing with. It's very difficult to go into a situation of negotiation, for instance, when you don't know who the other people are on the other side of the table. And that's exactly what is going on for many people. Many people think that the situation is very simple, and they think it's just a matter of reparations. Just give back what is owed. It's a lot more complicated than that, though. And a lot of the complications are actually spiritually grounded. And so you need to know spiritually, what are you dealing with? Not only what are you dealing with, but who are you spiritually? Because again, the foundation of all of this is spirituality based upon the assertions of the original colonizing entities. And so religion is at the foundation of a lot of what is going on and a lot of what has gone on. So let's start to break some of this down so that you can put some things into perspective. Our focus is clarity. And so in striving for clarity, we need to get some clarity about who we are talking about, we need to operationalize some people groups. What is apparent is that the original colonizers that came over in the 1400s, these colonizers historically were identified as Rome. However, they have another identity because Rome is another way of saying Babylon. This is not simply a symbolic dynamic. This is a language dynamic. There is something about Rome that is synonymous with Babylon. Now, these are seen as distinct empires. However, you're going to see that they are not distinct empires. And you're also going to see why it might be so difficult to wrap your mind around exactly what has taken place and what is taking place. We've looked at this construct of Rome before. Now, there is quite a bit of ambiguity about Rome. The origin of the word, how you pronounce it, how it's understood throughout time, whether it exists in current times. So there's a lot of ambiguity about Rome in general. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to look at some of these translations of Rome to get a better idea of Rome. And then we're going to look at some other dynamics about this Roman Empire. And so when we look into this construct of Rome, we see that it is an Aramaic word. Aramaic is not a language that we typically use today. And so we may not be as familiar with this Aramaic rendition of Rome. And so it looks like Romi or Romai. Then there is the Parthian, which is spelled using the letters that we use, FRWM. And then the Greek uses the term Romanoi. And so it's spelled ROMAIOI. And so you can see there are variations just when you're looking at the spelling. And then there is another way of understanding Rome, and it is pronounced room. Now let's get down to the psychology of Rome. First of all, it's important to keep in mind as we are having this analysis that Rome is Babylon. And so when we say Rome, it's the same as saying Babylon. When we say Babylon, it's the same as saying Rome. Now there is a motto that we're going to address first, and then we're going to look at another motto that is associated with Rome or the Roman Empire, the Babylonian Empire. And so the first motto that we are dealing with is Imperium Sine Fine. What does Imperium Sine Fine mean? When we deconstruct Imperium Sine Fine, we get to the psychology of the Roman Empire. We get to the psychology of the Babylonian Empire. We get to the spirit and the heart of Rome and the spirit and the heart of Babylon. And when we are talking about Rome and Babylon, we are talking about real people. We are not just talking about a word or an empire in the air. We are talking about actual people, boots on the ground, that have these identities that are a part of this empire. And this empire is what all of the indigenous people around the world have been dealing with for a very long period of time. We're talking about thousands of years at this point. Deconstructing this first motto tells you who you are dealing with. Imperium sine fine is empire without end. An empire that has no ending. It's also possible that there's an assertion that the empire had no beginning. There's a possible assertion that the empire has always existed. And that's when you start to get into some of the spiritual dynamics that are tied to this whole imperium sine fine situation here. And so with respect to Rome, the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, if you will, we have this motto. This is the calling card, empire without end. What is being indicated is that there is no end, there is no stopping point for Rome or Babylon. And so when people say the Roman Empire fell, according to this motto, that's not even a possibility. What's interesting is when you hear groups of people talking about empires and glorying in the idea of empires, you have to really consider what it is they are glorying in. There's also some glorying in the empire from Star Wars. Who were the members of the empire? What is an empire? And so when we're talking about the Roman Empire, the Babylonian Empire, what are we talking about when we talk about an empire? An empire signifies dominion, domination, supreme power, rulership, command, authority, control. And so some individuals psychologically are obsessed with the idea of control. It's that megalomania that we've talked about before. And so that's what goes with an empire. It comes with the territory. There is no empire without megalomania. It simply cannot exist. This is beyond a kingdom. This is usually a collective of kingdoms. This is beyond townships. This is beyond nation states. This is the idea of a supreme power. And so there is a God-like status that is attributed to the empire. Again, it's that supreme power, omnipotence. And some people are obsessed with the idea of having power and domination. What's interesting about individuals when they are obsessed with all of this external domination and power is that they tend to have little internal power going on. They tend to have little internal control going on. And so there is a lacking of an internalized locus of control, but they want to control everyone else. And so, of course, this is also a part of narcissism. This is a form of collective narcissism where individuals are collectively playing out the narcissistic dynamic. They are collectively asserting or wanting to assert authority and control over other people. Now, with respect to the Roman Empire, just using that term, there is a focus on scripture to often justify this position. And there's often even going back into the Old Testament to justify this excessive dominion. There are even individuals who, when they read scripture, they see something in there that says that Abraham will rule the world. And so therefore they are keen on the idea of being attached to Abraham, either through a birth narrative, lineage, or what some of them will call being grafted in. However it works, there's this idea of ruling with God or ruling as God. And again, this is another form of megalomania. People might call it righteousness. People might call it being a good believer, but something else is going on underneath that. It's not about God ruling. It's about them ruling on earth. And so then we look at this dynamic of without end. And so what is Rome talking about when it's talking about ruling without end, an empire that exists without end? If you remember those papal bulls, there was that language about enslaving people into perpetuity, that this would go on for forever. And this goes right along with this empire that's supposed to go on for forever. And so according to the motto, Imperium Sine Fine, this empire without end can take two forms. Without end can refer to time. And so, in other words, an empire that just goes on and on and on in terms of time. And it sort of looks that way at this point. And then there is the without end related to physical boundaries. And so geography, space. And so here the Roman Empire motto is that it is an empire that is without end in terms of space, no limits. Another way of saying this sort of no limits in terms of empire without end is the construct of universal. And so Roman universal is the same thing as empire without end. And another way of saying Roman universal is Roman Catholic, because Catholic is another way of saying universal. And so Roman Catholic is the same as saying empire without end. Accordingly, we have Babylon universal, because what we're talking about here with this motto is Babylon without end, and universal is another way of saying that. So far, are you getting the feeling that empire sine fine equates to a right of return? Are you getting a feeling that individuals who are caught up in this empire state of mind, are you getting a feeling that they would be interested in restorative justice or reparative justice? Are you getting that feeling? Okay, so what we also have with respect to empire without end is unbounded and uncontrolled. So this is an unrestrained dynamic. This is an empire that is essentially out of control, an empire that has no bounds, no limits. And so what we are seeing here is Rome unbounded, uncontrolled, Babylon unbounded, uncontrolled. Now, if empires were given to giving things back, they would not be empires. And so it's not a part of the nature of an empire to give things back, to be fair. It's not the nature of an empire to have morals that suggest fairness. That's not a part of being an empire. It's definitely not a part of being an empire without end, because an empire without end suggests all, the totality of the earth. And for some, it might even mean the totality of space external to the earth. Now, the Holy Roman Empire, or the Holy Babylonian Empire, has another motto. And in fact, this motto rivals the first one. And you might have seen it before. It is abbreviated as the vowels in our language: A, E, I, O, U. Now, my Latin is not that great, but we're going to try it out here. And so we have Austriae, A, Imperare, Orbi Universo. What is that all about? That is actually the motto of the Holy Roman Empire. And it's been around for a while. And you can see one of the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire, Frederick III. This motto is one of the reasons why we have the her versus her dynamic. We have the Holy Roman Empire versus her, versus all of the women and these matrilineal collectives around the earth in these indigenous communities, these indigenous nations. And here you can see some symbolism related to AEIOU. And AEIOU refers to Austria. Now, some might be wondering, why is the Holy Roman Empire, why is the Babylonian Empire focused on Austria? And what exactly is this motto that is in Latin? Well, we're going to translate it. That motto can be translated in one or two ways. One way is all earth is subject to Austria. Yes, all earth is subject to Austria. And so when you couple this with empire sine fine, essentially, this empire without end, you can see that the goal, the mission, the vision is all earth. This limitless dynamic, all earth is to be subject to Austria. Does this sound like a collective of people that are interested in being fair, that are interested in this dynamic of right of return or restorative justice or reparative justice in any real honest way? The other translation is Austria is to rule the whole world, not a part of the world, not the city of Rome, not the space that makes up ancient Babylon, but the entire world. We are not just talking about the East, we are talking about the East, the West, the North, and the South. And here you can see the translation for this motto going from the Latin into the English. And you see very clearly on the right-hand side, Austria is to rule the whole world. You might want to take some time to just sit back and think about that for a minute. What is that all about? Who is Austria? What does it mean to rule the whole world? And why on earth does Austria want to rule the whole world? Or why is Austria destined to rule the whole world? And keep in mind, we are not simply talking about the country known as Austria. We are talking about something else here. Remember, we are talking about the Roman Empire. We are talking about the Babylonian Empire. And so Austria is something more than simply a nation state, because we are, again, talking about an empire here. And so you can have the visual here to get an understanding of what the Roman Empire is talking about when it is talking about ruling the entire world. And so when we look at the entire world, we see Asia, Australia, Europe, Africa, South America, North America, the poles, north and south, or whatever direction they happen to be in right now. So we see the Western Hemisphere, we see the Eastern Hemisphere, we see the Southern, we see the Northern. And so what the Holy Roman Empire is talking about is ruling the whole thing. This is very similar to that whole dynamic of he will rule as God, or he will rule with God. This is suggesting a deification of some aspect of the Holy Roman Empire, the Babylonian Empire. And here you have a visual of this empire building. And so you can see that the empire building is starting in the east, and then it is moving to the west. What's interesting is when individuals in the west brag about coming from the east, and there's a question of why would so many people need to come from the east? There's so much space in the east. What is that migration all about? That migration that started clearly hundreds of years ago. What was that migration all about? Well, if we look at the papal bulls, we see a big part of the motivation for the migration. But you can see the migration starts in the east, it moves over to the west. And again, it's very interesting when individuals brag about coming from the east. And you have to ask the question of how did they come from the east? Now, different people have different narratives about how and why they came from the east. Some of it is a standard migration narrative. Some of it is slavery. Some of it is colonization. Some of it is empire building. Some people just happen to just float along the water and end up in the West. But ultimately, what we are looking at are aspects of empire building, however the empire building has taken place. Even the use of slavery, transatlantic slavery, trans-Saharan slavery, all of that can be included in the dynamic of empire building. We're not going to go deep into Mystery Austria at the moment, but it's just important to keep in mind that that's what we are talking about. And so when we are talking about this dynamic of empire building and the empire without end and the empire that is supposed to rule the entire world, the planet, the globe, when we are talking about that entity, we are talking about something that has been identified so far as this mystery Austria. Now, individuals are probably used to thinking about mystery Babylon. But again, because Austria is synonymous with Rome, is synonymous with Babylon, we have the same thing going on here. And so what is this mystery Austria all about? Hopefully you recall from earlier examinations that mystery comes from this construct mysterion. And so something that is mysterious. So in many ways, something that is mysterious is something that is unknown. And perhaps if we are talking about an empire, it is an empire that is not completely known. It's not completely understood. And in this way, going back to Star Wars, we have what could be understood as a phantom menace, a menace that is not completely known. And so, of course, this goes right back to Set. Who else would it go back to? Okay, so we have Set, who has been identified as the hidden one. And so Mystery Austria is also a hidden one, just like Mystery Babylon is a hidden one. And this supposed fallen Roman Empire is apparently a hidden one, because all of those things are one and the same. And so what are we also talking about when we are talking about the hidden ones? This is what's very interesting about this dynamic of Mystery Austria, Mystery Babylon, because there's another way of understanding this construct of mystery. And we've talked quite a bit about mystery. And so we're going to look at this mystery identity and the other way of understanding Mystery Rome, Mystery Babylon, Mystery Austria. And it perhaps will shed some light, interestingly, on this entire dynamic. And it might provide some insight to allow understanding or better understanding about some of the confusion that is going on, that has been going on with specific collectives of people around the world who have been subject to the empire building. When you analyze these constructs, what you find is Mystery Rome, Mystery Austria, Mystery Babylon is another way of saying Black Rome. Now, we have been led to believe or to understand this construct of Black to only relate to or primarily relate to the color black, sort of the crayon color black. However, Black is synonymous with a fair. It is synonymous with Moor. It is synonymous with Negro. These are simply different translations of the same construct in different languages. These are synonyms. Now, some people might argue that that is not the case. However, as far as we know, it is the case. What's important, however, is this is not necessarily about race. This is not to suggest that it's not about race. It's to suggest that it is broader than the construct of race. And quite frankly, there really are no races or nations with these names. But what we have with respect to this mystery dynamic is that Black Rome is suggesting, this mystery Rome is suggesting dark Rome, a Roman Empire that is dark, a Roman Empire that is concealed, a Babylonian Empire that is hidden, an Austrian Empire that is obscured. The other way of understanding Black, Moor, Negro affair is murky and also chaos. And so there are a lot of ways of understanding this mystery empire that is operating and expanding, unbounded, with supreme power. Now, To go back to the phenotype dynamic, there is the possibility that this is not just about a mystery, Black being mystery. It's also possible that Black, Negro, Moor is about phenotype. Because when you look at some of the artifacts from the Roman Empire, from Austria, what you see are indicators of a particular phenotype. You see often coily hair or curly hair. You see basically what looks like, in terms of crayon color, you will see a black skin color. And I mean literally black, not just brown or dark brown. You will also see phenotype dynamics, such as the structure of the eyes, structure of the nose, structure of the lips. And of course, there's often that Habsburg dynamic that goes along with a number of individuals who have been identified historically as Moor. And so there is perhaps more to this mystery Roman, Babylonian, Austrian Empire than we have been led to understand. And so it's important to keep in mind that we don't really know collectively what constitutes the Roman Empire. We don't know what constitutes the Babylonian Empire. And this amorphous nature of the Babylonian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, all of that adds to the murkiness. There's also, as you know, symbolically, another way of understanding the construct of Black. And it is about negativity. It is about chaos. It is about wrongdoing. And so it's not really about color as much as it's supposed to be about the color of character. And so when we think about the way that the Holy Roman Empire has presented itself, or the Babylonian Empire, or what has taken place with this empire building and this colonization, you can see that it's not goodwill. You can see that it's not nice. You can see that the ethics of it are questionable. The laws and the customs are questionable. The morals and the values are questionable. What's important to keep in mind with all of this is, with all of this questionable stuff, there is the suggestion that there is no interest in doing what is fair. There is no interest in returning rights to property. There is no interest in returning identities to people, because of course that would be counter to the interests of the empire. What's also noteworthy is that Black can also mean the opposite of what you would think it would mean. It can mean the shining one. It can mean the illuminated one, the light one. Another thing to keep in mind with respect to the issue of morals and values associated with this empire building dynamic is that when you are talking about narcissistic dynamics, whether we are talking about collective narcissism or individual narcissism, One of the things that often goes along with very pathological forms of narcissism is a lack of remorse, a lack of accountability for harming other people. And so there's often no motivation for apologizing. There's no motivation to give back. There's no motivation to acknowledge a wrong or a harm because the remorse is not there. There is no shame. There is no guilt. There's none of that. And so therefore, there is not usually the motivation to right any wrong that has occurred. And of course, if someone's motto is empire without end, such entities would not feel as though there would be anything to feel sorry about, because what they would be feeling would be a sense of accomplishment. And so again, individuals really need to consider the source. They need to consider the psychology and the spirit of the entities that they are hoping to get restoration from, that they are hoping will repair them. Because it would be really rare for someone who is operating under very pathological forms of narcissism, individually or collectively, it would be really rare for them to be instrumental in any healing process. It's so rare that it's non-existent, quite frankly. Now, I want to finish up with looking at this foundational entity, this Carolus or Charlemagne. Charlemagne was considered the Holy Roman Emperor, this foundational entity. Charlemagne is another way of saying Charles the Great. That's that main part. This is another way of saying Charles the God. And so in many ways, Charlemagne could be considered a deity, or he was someone who was deified. What's also interesting about Charlemagne, who purportedly started a lot of this, is that his name, Carolus, translates as free man. Also, it refers to bondman. So you have this dichotomy going on there. But you also have this emperor or this deified entity that has a name that also means man of low birth or degree. You might recall an earlier discussion that we had related to that Mackey book. And one of the things, I believe it was King Charles, one of the things that he was fighting against was this suggestion that he and his people were of low birth. And so when you fully consider just this small amount of information, these very basic dynamics related to the nature of the Holy Roman Empire, the Babylonian Empire, when you consider these basic facts, it helps to keep things in perspective in terms of what you are dealing with. Now, of course, most people are not just going to come out and suggest that they believe that it was right for the colonizers around the world to take over the property and the lives of all of these indigenous people. They are not going to say that. However, their actions when presented with opportunities for restoration and repair, their actions tell you what's really in the heart. So you can see what matters to the hearts of these individuals based upon their reactions to requests to right wrongs. You can tell by their actions what's in their heart about what you do when you hurt someone. You can tell by their actions what they believe should happen when people are wrong, unless, of course, it's them. Okay, so they may look at that in a very different way. But you can tell a lot about what to expect from individuals based upon how they react to even suggestions of doing what is right, when oftentimes they have been recipients of the wrong. And so when individuals are recipients of the wrong, it's sort of like those who buy things from boosters. When they have received stolen goods, they are not necessarily inclined to then take those stolen goods and take them back to the store from which the booster acquired the objects. And so, generally speaking, they may not be inclined to even entertain having wrongs righted. There's also the dynamic to consider with respect to the folks in the Hebrides and the associated areas. Those individuals also participated in, or one could say some of them were the victims of, what was known as the clearances. And so they underwent a clearing dynamic that was substantially similar to what happened in the Indian removals. In fact, there's a suggestion that perhaps the removals went as efficiently as they did because the individuals who were orchestrating the removals had been removed from their own homelands, and they did not have the fortitude, they did not have the courage, they did not have the wherewithal to figure out an alternative to being kicked off of their own lands and replaced by other people, because there are other people in those lands at this present moment. But those individuals who were kicked out, they have not gone back. They have simply settled themselves very comfortably in land that is not the land of their fathers.